On a quiet night in 1928, a 14-story wall of water erased entire communities from the map. They say if you stand by the Santa Paula riverbed on a moonless night, you can still hear the victims screaming, the final desperate cries of hundreds of souls swallowed by the flood. But that valley, a mass grave haunted by an entire community, doesn't even make our top 5. Stay with us as we journey through the 15 most haunted towns and villages in California, places where the dead don't just linger, they live. California, a dream built on sunshine and opportunity, but that's the story they sell you. The real history of this state wasn't written in Hollywood scripts. It was written in blood and gold, a history of savage greed in the mining camps, of profound sorrow within the mission walls, and of violent secrets buried just beneath the desert floor. That kind of history, it doesn't fade away. It leaves a stain. It leaves ghosts. Tonight, we are not just telling stories. We are journeying to 15 specific communities where that history is still frighteningly present. We will count down from the unsettling local legends to the epicenters of documented paranormal phenomena, leading you to the #1 most haunted town in the entire state. A place so fiercely protected by its spectral residents that taking so much as a pebble from its grounds is said to invite a very real and very personal curse into your life. We have the reports, the eyewitness accounts, and the dark history to back it up. The only question is, are you ready to see what's really living in the Golden State? Haunted place number 15, Idlewild, Riverside County. Our journey begins high in the San Jacinto Mountains, in a place that seems, at first, like a perfect escape. The town of Idlewild. Here the air is clean, filled with the sharp scent of pine and cedar. It's a quiet community, a haven for artists and hikers seeking peace in the shadow of the great granite peaks. But one of those peaks is different. It looms over the town, a titan of stone that seems to watch the residents with a cold, ancient indifference. The Cahuilla people, who have lived on this land for thousands of years, know its true name, Taquit's Rock. And they know it is not empty. Before the first prospector ever set foot in these mountains, the Cahuilla told the story of Taquit's. He wasn't always a monster. He was one of them, a shaman of great power and renown. But power has a way of twisting the soul. Some legends say he fell in love with a woman he could not have, and his obsession drove him to use forbidden magic. Others say he simply craved more power than any one man should possess. Whatever the cause, his spirit turned dark, his magic became poison, and he began to hunt his own people. The other shamans combined their strength, and in a cataclysmic battle, they defeated him. But he could not be killed. Instead, they banished him, imprisoning his malevolent eternal consciousness within the massive rock that now bears his name. He lives there still, a prisoner and a predator. To this day, the Cahuilla people regard the rock with profound fear and respect. They say Taquit's is the source of all evil in the mountains, that he causes rock slides, lightning strikes, and unexplained disappearances. They believe his spirit can reach out from the stone, snatching the souls of anyone who shows weakness or disrespect, and dragging them back into his granite prison for eternity. It's a chilling local legend, the kind of story you might dismiss as simple folklore, until you talk to the people who have been there. Hikers on the trails leading to the rock speak of a sudden, unnerving silence. The birds stop singing. The wind dies. All you can hear is the sound of your own blood pounding in your ears. Then comes the feeling, the unshakable certainty that you are being watched. Not by a mountain lion, not by another hiker, but by the mountain itself. People report seeing strange green lights flickering across the rock's sheer face late at night, a phenomenon with no geological explanation. Others have heard a low, deep rumbling coming from within the stone, a sound that feels ancient and angry. But the most terrifying accounts come from the rock climbers. Seasoned climbers, men and women who have scaled peaks all over the world, tell stories that defy all logic. They speak of reaching a difficult section of the climb, their muscles burning, their mind focused, and then feeling a sudden, overwhelming, irrational desire to just let go. An almost seductive whisper in their mind, telling them to release their grip, to fall into the abyss. They describe it as a psychic pull, a malevolent will emanating from the rock itself, trying to claim them. For a century, people have gone missing in these mountains. Accidents happen, of course. Hikers get lost, but every time someone vanishes near that colossal stone, the old Cahuilla legend echoes through the town. Takits has claimed another soul. When you look at that granite monolith, you are not just looking at a geological formation. You are looking at a prison, and its inmate is always watching, always waiting. But not all of California's lost souls are trapped in stone, high above the world. Some are bound to the earth itself, to the very soil that holds their decaying bones. Our next story takes us away from the mountain peaks and down into a valley shrouded in coastal fog, a place where the ancient trees are so tall they block out the sun. Here, a heartbroken spirit doesn't just haunt her grave. She wanders from the cemetery, crossing a covered bridge from another time, and disappears into a forest so dark, it feels like it could swallow you whole. Haunted Place. Number 14. Felton, Santa Cruz County. We leave the high, desolate peaks and descend into a valley shrouded in coastal fog, a place where the air grows heavy and damp. Here, in the Santa Cruz Mountains, lies the small town of Felton. It's a town defined by shadows, not just the fleeting shadows of the clouds, but the permanent, deep-rooted darkness cast by the sentinels that guard this place, the ancient redwood trees. These giants, centuries old, stand so close and grow so tall that even at midday, the forest floor is a world of twilight. They absorb sound. They absorb light. And some say they absorb secrets. In the heart of this town sits the Felton Cemetery, and within its iron gates rests the body of a young woman named Sarah Tuthill. Everyone in town just called her Sadie. She died in 1894. She was only 23 years old. Her headstone is simple, weathered by more than a century of mountain air. There was no great violence in her death, no bloody legend of murder or revenge. She was taken by an illness, her life extinguished with the quiet, cruel finality of disease. A tragedy, yes, but a common one for the time. So why did she never leave? The first stories are the ones you might expect. Locals, for generations, have spoken of a feeling of profound sadness near her grave. And then there are the flowers. To this day, fresh flowers will mysteriously appear on her headstone, left by no one that anyone can identify. A quiet, lovely tribute, perhaps. But then, people began to see her. A fleeting shape of a woman in a white, old-fashioned dress seen from the corner of an eye, weeping amongst the tombstones. The White Lady of Felton, they call her. A lonely, heartbroken spirit, forever tied to her final resting place. If the story ended there, it would be sad. It would be unsettling. But it doesn't end there. Her sorrow, it seems, could not be contained by the cemetery walls. Just down the road from the graveyard is the Felton-covered bridge, a wooden relic from 1892, and it is here that the true terror of Sadie's story begins. Motorists crossing the bridge late at night have slammed on their brakes, swearing they saw a woman standing in the middle of the structure, her form luminous in their headlights. Before they can even react, she vanishes. Locals whisper that the bridge was a place she was meant to meet a lover, a meeting that her sudden death prevented. And so she waits, trapped in an eternal, heartbreaking loop. But even that is not the worst of it. The most chilling accounts, the stories that make locals walk a little faster after dusk, are of what happens next. They see her on the bridge, a figure of translucent grief. But she doesn't always wait. Sometimes, She moves. She has been seen stepping off the far end of the bridge, her pale form drifting away from the road, away from the town, and directly towards the impenetrable wall of the redwood forest. Witnesses watch, paralyzed, as this spirit from another century walks silently past the first line of giant trees, her white dress a stark beacon against the immense darkness. She doesn't look back. And then, the forest simply swallows her. She is gone. This is the question that haunts Felton. Where is she going? A ghost is supposed to haunt the place of its life, or its death. But Sadie's spirit walks away from both, into the silent ancient woods. It's as if her own sorrow is not the only force at play. As if something older and far more powerful, residing in the deep darkness of that forest, is calling her home. A single heartbroken ghost wandering the woods is a terrifying thought. But what happens when an entire community perishes at once? When their deaths are not a slow tragedy, but a sudden, violent inferno fueled by hatred and betrayal. Our next location takes us to the murky waters of the California Delta, to a town built upon the ashes of another. A place where, on certain nights, residents don't just see a ghost. They smell the smoke of a fire that burned out a century ago, and hear the phantom screams of its victims, still trapped in the flames. Haunted place number 13, Ileton, Sacramento County. We now drift into the heart of the California Delta, a disorienting maze of murky waterways and reclaimed farmland. It's a place that feels disconnected from time, where thick tulle fog can roll in without warning, swallowing the roads, the river, and the sky itself. In this strange and isolated landscape sits the town of Ileton. Today, it's a sleepy community. Its historic main street a quiet echo of a more prosperous time. But do not be fooled by the silence. This town is built on top of ashes. And the embers have never truly gone cold. In the early 1920s, Ileton was home to one of the largest and most vibrant Chinatowns in the entire Delta. It was a bustling, self-contained world of restaurants, general stores, gambling halls, and opium dens. It was a place of immense life and of deeply rooted conflict. Beneath the surface of daily commerce, a silent war was being waged between rival Chinese secret societies, the Tongs. These were not simple street gangs. They were powerful, sophisticated organizations, and their disputes over territory, money, and power were settled with brutal finality. Then came the night of October 26, 1926. A fire started. No one knows exactly how, but no one believed it was an accident. The flames erupted in the heart of Chinatown, leaping from one wooden building to the next with terrifying speed. It was not a fire. It was a furnace. The narrow streets became inescapable traps. The community that had thrived for decades was consumed in a single night of fire and terror. When the sun rose the next morning, Chinatown was gone, wiped from the map. An entire world of more than 500 people erased. The official reports were vague, but the whispers were clear. This was an attack. An act of war. A massacre by fire. A new town was built over the blackened foundations. Life moved on, but the ground remembers. The current residents of Ileton, people living and working in buildings that stand directly on the site of the inferno, are plagued by phenomena that cannot be explained away. It begins with the smell. On a perfectly clear, calm night, with no wind and no fires for miles, the unmistakable stench of thick, acrid smoke will drift through the streets. It's the smell of old wood and something else, something sickeningly organic, burning. Then come the sights. People walking down the street at dusk will see it in the second-story windows of the historic buildings. A frantic, ghostly orange flicker. It's not a reflection. It's like looking through a window into another time, witnessing the reflection of a great fire that has long since burned out. It dances and writhes for a moment, and then vanishes, leaving only the dark glass behind. But the smell and the sights are nothing compared to the sounds. This is not the gentle whisper of a lonely spirit. This is the sound of mass terror. In the alleys behind Main Street, where the heart of Chinatown once stood, people have heard it. A sudden burst of disembodied voices shouting in panicked Cantonese and Mandarin. They are not just voices, they are screams. Cries of warning, shouts of betrayal, the raw sound of hundreds of people realizing they are trapped. Paranormal investigators have brought audio equipment into these alleys and captured electronic voice phenomena that, when analyzed, have revealed words spoken in Cantonese. The words for fire, help us, and traitor. The haunting of Ileton is the echo of a Holocaust. It is the collective energy of an entire community murdered in a single night, their final, violent moments seared into the very atmosphere of the town. The fire is over, but the burning never stopped. A community destroyed by a secret war is a chilling legacy. But what about a town where the war was never a secret? A place so steeped in sin and lawlessness that it didn't need to burn down, because it was already a kind of hell on earth. Our next stop takes us deep into Gold Rush country, to a town whose name literally means Little Ovens, a place that became the chosen hideout for California's most infamous outlaw, a man who built a network of tunnels beneath the streets to move in secret. They say the tunnels are still there, and so are the ghosts of the men who died in them, their violent quarrels still echoing in the darkness beneath your feet. Haunted Place Number 12, Hornitos, Mariposa County. We leave the Delta's fog behind and travel east into the scorched, golden foothills of the Sierra Nevada. Here, the heat is a physical presence. The sun beats down on crumbling adobe walls and dusty, deserted streets. This is Hornitos, and its very name, given by the early Mexican miners, is a warning. It means little ovens. It doesn't refer to the climate. It refers to the graves. The early settlers, finding the ground too hard to dig, built their tombs above the earth, small, oven-like mausoleums that baked under the California sun. The town began quite literally as a city of the dead, and it lived up to its name. During the gold rush, Hornitos was not a town for hopeful families. It was a town of exile. When miners of Mexican, Chilean, and Peruvian descent were run out of the surrounding camps by racist laws and violent mobs, they came here. Hornitos became a pocket of defiance, a place that spat in the face of the law, and where the law is absent, sin thrives. It was a town with 7 saloons, multiple fandango halls, and a culture of violence that was not hidden, but celebrated. Fights were nightly entertainment. Gunshots were as common as conversation. It was a raw, dangerous, and unapologetically alive place, and it was the perfect sanctuary for California's most legendary outlaw, Joaquin Murrieta. While his exploits were romanticized, the reality was that Murrieta was a man of deadly cunning and brutal efficiency. And Hornitos was his kingdom. He drank in its saloons, gambled at its tables, and found comfort in its lawlessness. But his true genius lay hidden. Right beneath the town's chaotic streets, Murrieta and his gang maintained a network of secret tunnels, a hidden underworld that allowed them to move from the fandango hall to the saloon to a stable for a quick escape, all without ever being seen. It was through these dark earthen corridors that deals were made, gold was moved, and men disappeared. Today, Hornitos is nearly a ghost town. The silence is deafening. The population has dwindled to almost nothing, but as the sun sets and the heat of the day bleeds away into a cold desert night, the silence breaks. The few residents who remain and the rare, brave visitors who stay after dark all report the same impossible thing. The sounds come from the ground. Stand near the plaza, over the sealed entrance to one of Murrieta's tunnels, and listen. At first, it's faint. The ghostly echo of a guitar from a long-dead fandango hall, the clinking of whiskey glasses and poker chips from a phantom game. But if you stay longer, the sounds become clearer, more violent. You'll hear the muffled shout of an argument, the heavy thud of a body hitting a wooden floor, the sharp, distinct crack of a gunshot fired from a ghost's gun, deep beneath your feet. Apparitions are seen here, but they are not the sad, weeping spirits of other towns. These are the ghosts of hard, violent men. A spectral gambler is seen near the ruins of the saloon, forever searching for a lost stash of gold. The ghost of a hanged man is said to still dangle from a large iron hook on the side of the old jail. And sometimes, on the hills overlooking the desolate town, people report seeing a lone figure on horseback, a dark silhouette against the moon, watching over his crumbling empire. The ghost of Joaquin Murrieta himself. The tunnels may be collapsed, their entrances sealed with dirt and stone, but they still function as a conduit, a channel for the raw, violent energy that saturated this town. Hornitos is dead on the surface, but it is furiously, violently alive underground. The outlaws and their victims are still there, forever fighting their battles in the darkness. It's one thing to feel the presence of the dead in a desolate, crumbling ruin. It's easy to believe in ghosts when you are the only living soul for miles. But what if the ghosts were not in a ruin? What if they walked the streets of a town that looks exactly as it did in the 1850s? A town that is filled every day with tourists and actors in period clothing. Our next location is a place where the past isn't just a memory, it's a performance. And the most terrifying question is, how can you tell the difference between the actors and the real spirits who never, ever left? Haunted place number 11, Columbia to Tuolumne County. We now arrive in a place that breaks all the rules of a ghost town, because it isn't one. Our last stop was a ruin, haunted by the echoes of violence. But this place is alive. This is Columbia State Historic Park, the gem of the Southern Mines. You step from your car, and you step into 1855. The blacksmith's hammer rings against hot steel. A stagecoach, drawn by 4 horses, rumbles down the street. Men and women in period clothing walk the wooden boardwalks, greeting visitors with a tip of the hat or a graceful nod. It is a perfect, living performance of history. And that is precisely what makes it so terrifying. Because as you walk these streets, as you buy sarsaparilla from the saloon and watch the actors go about their day, a deeply unsettling question begins to form in your mind. What if some of them aren't acting? Columbia, for all its preserved charm, was still a gold rush town. It saw incredible wealth, but it also saw incredible misery. Fortunes were lost overnight. Men died in the mines, and hearts were broken with brutal finality. While other towns faded into dust, Columbia was frozen in time by preservation efforts, creating a perfect time capsule. The problem is, when you seal a capsule, everything inside gets trapped, including the original residents who never accepted that their time was over. You can check into the historic City Hotel, one of the oldest operating hotels in California. You can sleep in a room with antique furniture and imagine what life was like, but you won't be imagining it alone. Staff and guests have for decades reported encounters with the hotel's permanent residents. The most prominent is a spirit they call Elizabeth. They say she was a woman who waited in one of the front rooms for her beloved fiancé to return from the mines, a man she would never see again. Guests staying in her room report waking in the dead of night to the strong, sweet scent of perfume filling the air, even though the doors and windows are locked. They hear the faint, sad sigh of a woman's breath right beside them in the darkness. Some have opened their eyes to see the clear impression of a body sitting on the edge of their bed, only to watch it slowly fade away. But the hotel is not the most unsettling place in Columbia. For that, you must walk to the old brick schoolhouse. It sits at the end of a street, looking exactly as it did more than a century ago. Inside, small wooden desks are arranged in neat rows. Old textbooks and slates sit waiting for students who will never arrive. It should be a place of innocent memory, but the staff who maintain it and the visitors who tour it know better. There is something else in that room. It has no name. It has no story. It is simply there. People will be standing in the main classroom listening to a guide and suddenly be struck by a cold so intense it makes their teeth chatter. A cold that is confined to a single invisible spot in the room. Others have felt it directly. A distinct, deliberate tug on their pants leg or on the hem of a shirt. They turn instantly, expecting to see a child who has wandered away from a tour group, and find absolutely no one there. The most disturbing reports, the ones that make the hair on your arms stand up, are the auditory encounters. When the room is empty and quiet, just as you are about to walk out the door, you hear it. A single, clear giggle, the sound of a small child, right behind you. An unseen entity, in a children's schoolhouse. It doesn't cry, it doesn't moan, it plays, it watches, it waits for you to turn your back. The spirits of the city hotel are tragic echoes. The entity in the schoolhouse feels like something else entirely. It feels aware. The town of Columbia is a perfect time capsule, but some of the original inhabitants were sealed inside with it. They walk the same streets, occupy the same rooms, and watch the endless parade of strangers, waiting. Sleeping in a haunted hotel is one thing, but the spirits of Columbia are often fleeting. A scent, a sound, a brief touch, they are echoes of the town's past. But our next destination features a spirit who is anything but an echo. In another gold rush town just down the road, there is a hotel where the primary ghost isn't shy at all. She is a woman consumed by such profound, violent grief that her presence is an oppressive force. Guests in her room don't just feel a chill. They feel her sorrow. They wake to the sound of her weeping at their bedside, and some have been forced to flee in the middle of the night, unable to endure a heartbreak so powerful. It has outlived death itself. Haunted place number 10, Jamestown, Tuolumne County. We arrive now at another relic of the gold rush, the town of Jamestown, and at its heart, a brick building that has stood since 1859, weathering fires, floods, and the passage of time, the National Hotel. It holds the distinction of being one of the oldest continuously operating hotels in all of California. When you walk inside, the air feels thick with history. The wooden bar is worn smooth by the elbows of prospectors and pioneers. The floors creak with the weight of 150 years of secrets. Many old places have stories, but this hotel is possessed by a single dominant tragedy, a story so potent it has stained the very fabric of the building. This is the story of Flo. She was young, she was in love, and this was supposed to be the day her life truly began. She waited upstairs, in her room, dressed for her wedding. Downstairs, in the saloon, her fiancé was celebrating with his friends. The sounds of laughter and music would have drifted up the staircase. And then, a different sound. A drunken argument, voices raised in anger, a sudden sharp crack that silenced the entire hotel. A gunshot. In that single echoing moment, Flo's world ended. Her love, her future, her entire reason for being, was dead on the saloon floor below. The minutes that followed for her, alone in that room, are an unimaginable abyss of despair. The joy of her wedding day curdled into the most profound, absolute grief. A grief so total, so unbearable that she could not face taking another breath in a world without him. She took her own life, right there, in the room where she was supposed to have started her new one. And that is where the true horror begins, because her spirit, her sorrow, never left that room. Guests who book her former room, room 12, often notice it immediately. A faint, sweet scent of gardenias that hangs in the air with no obvious source. As night begins to fall, the room's atmosphere shifts. Objects are known to move. A book placed on the nightstand might be found on the floor. A suitcase, left closed, will be found open. The rocking chair in the corner will begin to sway, gently, rhythmically, moved by an unseen occupant. These are the subtle signs. The prelude. The real experience happens in the dead of night. You will be sound asleep, and you will be woken up. Not by a noise, but by a feeling. an oppressive, emotional weight that fills the darkness, so heavy it feels hard to breathe. Then, you might feel a cold spot move across the room and a distinct pressure on the edge of the mattress, as if someone has just sat down, right next to you. And then, you will hear it. It is not a whisper. It is not a distant moan. It is the unmistakable, soul-crushing sound of a woman weeping. It is the sound of utter and complete heartbreak, happening right there in the dark beside you. It is a grief so raw, so powerful. It feels like a physical force. Guests have reported being paralyzed by it, unable to move, forced to lie there and listen to the sounds of a soul eternally shattering. The staff at the National Hotel are used to it. They receive panicked calls in the middle of the night. Guests, their faces pale and their hands shaking, will appear at the front desk, begging for a different room, or simply fleeing the hotel entirely, unable to spend another second in the presence of a grief so ancient and powerful it has become contagious. Flo's heartbreak wasn't buried with her. It was absorbed by the walls of her room, where it plays out, night after night, for any guest unfortunate enough to witness it. To be trapped in a room with a ghost's bottomless grief is a terrifying ordeal. But what if the spirit isn't trapped in a room? What if her sorrow is so vast it fills an entire town, a town of ornate Victorian homes that seem designed to hold secrets? Our next destination is a place so perfectly preserved it's called the Victorian Village. But its beauty hides a deep melancholy. We're going to a town where the most prominent ghost doesn't haunt a hotel. She haunts a graveyard, eternally wandering among the tombstones of children, her own silent grief a chilling mystery that has puzzled the living for over a century. Haunted place number 9. Ferndale, Humboldt County. We travel now, far up the coast, to a place that seems to have been plucked from a forgotten storybook. This is Ferndale, the Victorian village. It is, without question, one of the most beautiful and perfectly preserved towns in the entire country. Ornate, meticulously crafted Victorian homes. The butterfat palaces, built by wealthy dairy barons, line the streets in a breathtaking display of 19th century elegance. It looks like a postcard, a perfect, peaceful dream of a bygone era. But dreams can turn to nightmares when the fog rolls in. And here on the Lost Coast, the fog is a living entity. It drifts in from the cold Pacific, swallowing the town in a thick gray blanket, muffling all sound, and transforming the beautiful ornate houses into ghostly silhouettes. It is in this fog that the town's cheerful veneer dissolves, and its deep, abiding melancholy surfaces. The heart of this sorrow is found on a wind-swept hill overlooking the town, the Ferndale Cemetery. And it is here that people see the Lady in White. Unlike other spirits, she has no definitive story. No one knows her name. No one knows for sure how she died. She is a beautiful, terrifying mystery. She appears as a tall, slender woman in a flowing white Victorian dress, her face often obscured by shadows or turned away as if deep in mourning. She simply is. A fixture of the graveyard, as permanent as the tombstones themselves. And for over a century, witnesses have reported the same chilling details. She is most often seen drifting through the oldest parts of the cemetery, but she is not just wandering aimlessly. She is drawn by some unknown, heartbreaking force to one specific section, the Children's Corner. Here lie the tiny, weathered graves of infants and toddlers who succumbed to the harsh realities of life in the 1800s. And it is here that the Lady in White keeps her vigil. Groundskeepers have seen her from a distance, kneeling beside a small cherubic headstone, her form so solid they mistake her for a living person, until she rises and glides away, seeming to float over the uneven ground before vanishing. Visitors have felt an inexplicable wave of sadness wash over them in that part of the cemetery, a grief that does not feel like their own, only to look up and see her standing near the edge of the woods, watching. Is she a mother, eternally searching for a lost child of her own? Is that why she is drawn to these specific graves? Or is her tragedy something else entirely? Is she a woman who died before she could ever have a family? Her spirit now tending to all the children the town has lost? The not knowing is what gnaws at you. Her silence, her mysterious purpose, is what makes the skin crawl. But she is not always silent. When the fog is at its thickest, when the world is reduced to a few feet of visibility and the air is cold and damp, that's when you might hear her. It's not a scream. It's not a cry. It is, somehow, even more disturbing. It's the sound of faint, indecipherable whispers carried on the mist. You can't make out the words, but you can feel the meaning. It is the sound of pure, undiluted loss, a sound that bypasses your ears and sinks directly into your bones. She remains a beautiful, terrifying mystery, a ghost defined not by her own story, but by the grief she holds for others, a silent sentinel in a city of the dead. The quiet sorrow of a single mysterious spirit can linger in the air for a century. But what happens when a building is so saturated with history that it isn't haunted by just one ghost, but by a whole cast of them? Our next stop takes us south, to a charming mountain town where the most haunted location isn't a lonely graveyard, but a historic hotel. A place where the spirits of the dead still go about their business, a spectral owner still making his rounds, and the ghost of a jilted bride still weeping in her room, and they don't seem to mind if the living are there to watch. Haunted place number 8, Julian, San Diego County. We descend now from the foggy coast and climb into the crisp, clean air of the mountains east of San Diego. We come to Julian, a town famous for its gold rush history, its charming main street, and its world-renowned apple pie. It is, by all accounts, a delightful place to visit. People come here to escape, to breathe fresh air, to step back into a simpler time. And at the heart of the town stands the Julian Gold Rush Hotel, a beautiful Victorian building that has been welcoming guests since 1897. It's a place people come to rest, but the hotel is never restful, because the original guests never checked out. The story of this hotel begins with a man named Albert Robinson. A former slave from Georgia, he made his way to California, and through sheer determination and hard work, he built this very hotel. It was his life's achievement, a monument to his freedom and success. He took immense pride in his establishment, overseeing every detail with a watchful eye. And when he died, his shift simply never ended. Unlike the violent or sorrowful spirits we've encountered, the ghost of Albert Robinson is that of a diligent spectral proprietor. He is the hotel's most enduring resident. Staff working late at night in the dining room have seen a tall, shadowy figure standing near the windows, as if inspecting the room before the morning rush. Cleaning crews will leave a room in perfect order, only to return and find a misplaced chair has been pushed back into its proper place. His presence isn't frightening in a traditional sense. It is proprietary. It's a constant, unnerving reminder that when you are in his hotel, you are under his watch. He is the host, but he is not alone. A hotel that has stood for over a century has seen more than its share of human drama, and it has held on to the most potent moments. The most tragic of these resides in room 10. This is the room of the jilted bride. Like so many other stories from that era, hers is one of love and devastating loss. She waited in that room for a groom who would never arrive, and her profound sorrow saturated the space. Guests who stay in room 10 today are often overcome with a feeling of inexplicable sadness. They wake in the night to the sound of a woman's soft, inconsolable weeping. Some have seen a misty, feminine form standing by the window, forever gazing down at the street below, eternally waiting. If it were just Albert and the weeping bride, this would be a classic haunted hotel. But it is so much more. The Julian Hotel isn't just haunted by a few distinct spirits. It is a nexus of paranormal activity. It is fully and actively occupied. The hallways are a thoroughfare for the dead. Disembodied voices are heard constantly. The murmur of conversations from rooms that are empty. The sharp laugh of a man from a vacant corridor. The sound of heavy, booted footsteps are often heard pacing in the room directly above you, even when the hotel staff can confirm that room is unoccupied. The doors here have a life of their own, locking and unlocking with a loud, sudden click, startling guests in the dead of night. In the kitchen, chefs have grown accustomed to seeing pots and pans slide across countertops or hearing cabinets fly open on their own. It is a constant, low-level chaos, as if a dozen different spirits are all going about their spectral business, completely indifferent to the living guests who are temporarily sharing their space. The Julian Hotel isn't just a building with a ghost story. It's an apartment complex for the deceased. The spirits there aren't just echoes. They are eternal residents, and when you pay for a room, you are merely a guest in their home. Sharing a hotel with a cast of ghosts is one thing, but at least when you leave the hotel, you return to the world of the living. Our next location offers no such escape. We are heading into the blistering heat of the Mojave Desert, to a town that died long ago but was reanimated as a tourist attraction. Here, the ghosts aren't confined to a single building. They walk the dusty streets, they watch from the empty saloons, and the most terrifying one of all waits for you deep underground in the darkness of a sealed silver mine. A place where the ghost of a child's laughter can turn into a scream that echoes for eternity. Haunted place number 7, Calico, San Bernardino County. We now leave the mountains behind and plunge into the vast, brutal emptiness of the Mojave Desert. The heat here is a physical enemy. It shimmers off the sand, distorting the horizon, making the world look like a fever dream. And out of this shimmering heat, a town appears, perched on the side of a mountain, Calico. It looks like a mirage, a perfect relic of the Old West. But this is no mirage. It is a real ghost town, a place that boomed with silver and died when the silver ran out. Decades later, it was purchased and restored, its buildings brought back from the brink of collapse to become a tourist park. But you cannot restore a town without disturbing its residents. And the original residents of Calico are still very much at home. The town itself is patrolled by its most famous spirit, a tall, lanky lawman they call Tumbleweed. He was the town's last marshal, and he is seen as a spectral guardian, his ghostly figure seen walking the dusty main street at night still on his beat. But Tumbleweed is a benign presence, a watchful protector. The true horror of Calico is not found on its sun-scorched streets. It is found underground, in the cold, suffocating darkness of the Maggie Mine. When you join a tour and step through the entrance of the mine, the 10-degree drop in temperature is a welcome relief from the desert heat. But that relief is short-lived. As you descend into the earth, the darkness becomes absolute, the silence profound. You are walking through the tomb of the men who tore a fortune in silver from these rocks, men who often died from cave-ins, explosions, or the slow, agonizing death of lungs choked with dust. And they are still here. Visitors on ghost tours have heard the faint, metallic scrape of a pickaxe against rock, echoing from a tunnel where no one is working. They hear the dry, rattling coughs of the long-dead miners. Paranormal investigators have captured countless recordings of disembodied voices whispering a single urgent warning from the darkness. Get out. But the miners are not the most terrifying presence in the Maggie Mine. There is someone else here. Someone younger. The story goes that a young boy, playing where he shouldn't have been, was killed in a horrific accident involving a runaway mining cart. His death was quick, violent, and unexpected, and his spirit remains, trapped in the place where his childhood ended. At first, his presence can seem almost playful. As you stand in the dark, listening to the tour guide, you might feel a sudden small tug on your shirt, or a light poke in your back, as if a child is trying to get your attention. And then you might hear it. From a dark, unexplored side tunnel, the faint, echoing giggle of a young boy. It's unnerving, a sound of innocence in a place of death. But it's just the beginning. For those who linger too long, for those who are unlucky enough to be there when his energy fully manifests, the game changes. The innocent giggle begins to warp. It becomes manic, strained, filled with a note of rising panic. And then it stops. The silence that follows is thick and heavy with anticipation. And then it is shattered by a sound that will freeze the blood in your veins. A scream, a single high-pitched, blood-curdling scream of a child in absolute terror. It rips through the confines of the mind, seeming to come from everywhere at once. It is not a ghostly moan. It is the raw, visceral sound of the final moment of his life. A sound of crushing metal and breaking bones. A memory of agony so powerful it has been imprinted onto the very rock, forced to replay for anyone who dares to enter his tomb. In Calico, the dead don't just walk the streets. They still work the mines, and the youngest among them ensures that no one ever forgets the agony of how he died. A child's scream echoing from a dark mine is a sound of pure, primal terror. It speaks to a violent, accidental end. But not all of California's famous ghosts are born from such raw horror. Some are born from passion, from a love so intense it defies even a violent death. Our next story takes us from the scorching desert to the cold, foggy cliffs of the Pacific coast. We're going to a place haunted by a spirit so famous, so beautiful, and so tragic that her story has become a legend. The ghost of a woman in a blue dress, forever searching the ocean for the lover she lost. Haunted Place Number 6, Moss Beach, San Mateo County. We flee the blistering desert and travel back to the coast, to a place where the air is thick with salt and secrets. Perched on a rugged cliff overlooking the violent, churning Pacific sits a lone building. The Moss Beach Distillery. Below, waves crash against the rocks with relentless fury. Above, the sky is often a blanket of thick, gray fog. It is a place of dramatic, isolated beauty, and it is home to one of California's most famous and tragic ghosts. To understand the haunting, you must understand the history. During the Roaring '20s, this was not the respectable restaurant it is today. It was a notorious speakeasy called Frank's Place. A place of illegal booze, backroom deals, and silent film stars mingling with shadowy political figures. It was a world of secrets, and at the center of its most enduring secret was a beautiful young woman, known to us only as the Blue Lady. She was, the story goes, entangled in a passionate and forbidden affair with the speakeasy's piano player. Here, amidst the secret knocks and whispered passwords, they carved out a world for themselves. Their love was intense, a secret flame burning brightly against the backdrop of the cold, gray ocean. They made plans to run away, to leave this life of secrets behind, but their story does not have a happy ending. One night, she was walking on the desolate beach below the cliffs, perhaps waiting to meet her lover. She was never seen alive again. Was she attacked? Did she fall from the treacherous cliff path? Or was she pushed, a victim of a jealous rage? No one knows for sure. Her death, like her affair, was a secret the ocean kept. But her spirit refused to leave. Her love was too strong, her end too sudden. She returned to the one place she knew she could find him. And she waits there still. Today, diners at the restaurant are participants in her eternal vigil. The haunting here is intimate and often unnervingly physical. Couples dining near the windows have felt a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature, a cold that has nothing to do with the coastal air, as if a heartbroken spirit has just drifted past their table. Servers have stories of placing a check on a table, only to have it inexplicably lift into the air and flutter to the floor. Glasses have been known to slide across the bar, moved by an unseen hand. It's as if her restless energy still lingers, playfully at times, but always with an undercurrent of deep loss. But the most profound encounters are the sightings. Patrons and staff have for decades seen her. The Blue Lady. She appears as a translucent figure in a flowing, elegant blue dress from the fashion of the 1920s. She is never angry. She is never violent. She is simply searching. She is seen most often standing near the large windows of the dining room, the very windows that look out over the beach where she died. She stares out at the relentless waves, her form shimmering, her focus absolute. She is oblivious to the modern world around her, to the diners and the staff. She is lost in her own time, forever scanning the shoreline, waiting for a piano player who died almost a century ago. Her love story was cut short, but her devotion became eternal. She died on the beach below, but her heart remains in that room, forever listening for a piano melody that will never play again. A ghost trapped by love is a powerful, tragic thing. Her sorrow is a personal storm that rages within the walls of a single building. But what happens when the sorrow isn't personal? What happens when it belongs to an entire land, a land built on conquest and conversion, a land that is physically, seismically unstable? Our next destination takes us to a place of supposed holiness that sits directly on top of the San Andreas Fault. We're going to a Spanish mission where a ghostly monk still walks the grounds. But the true terror comes not from him, but from the earth itself, and the hundreds of bodies buried in a mass grave just outside the sacred walls. Haunted place number 5, San Juan Bautista, San Benito County. We journey now into the heart of Spanish California, to a town that feels perfectly preserved in amber. San Juan Bautista, the historic plaza, the beautiful adobe mission with its long, cool colonnade. It is a place of serene, quiet reverence. It feels holy, but this holiness is a fragile illusion, stretched thin over two immense and terrifying truths. The first is that the mission sits directly on the edge of the San Andreas Fault. The very ground here is unstable, a wound in the earth's crust, waiting to tear open. The second is that the mission is built upon a foundation of conquest, disease, and death on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. When the Spanish Franciscans arrived here in the late 1700s, they came to save souls. They founded the mission to convert the local Mutsun people to Christianity. But along with their faith, they brought something else. European diseases, measles, smallpox, influenza, illnesses to which the native population had absolutely no immunity. Epidemics swept through the mission like wildfire. The death toll was catastrophic. The small, formal cemetery, with its neat rows of Christian graves, was quickly overwhelmed. So they dug a pit. Just outside the consecrated walls of the cemetery, a mass grave was created to hold the thousands of indigenous men, women, and children who perished. They died on their own ancestral land, stripped of their culture, and were buried without ceremony in unholy ground. This is the source of the deep psychic wound that infects this place. The mission does have its own, more traditional ghost. The spirit of Father Esteban Tapis, a priest known for his love of music, is often seen walking the mission grounds. His cowled Franciscan-robed figure has been spotted gliding silently down the long, echoing church corridor, or standing in the mission gardens, a lonely, melancholic figure from the past. His presence is a quiet, predictable echo. But the true terror of San Juan Bautista does not come from a single monk. It comes from the earth itself. Visitors who walk the grounds, particularly near the unmarked area of the mass grave, report a sudden and dramatic shift in the atmosphere. It begins as a feeling of profound sadness, a sorrow so heavy and ancient it feels like a physical weight pressing down on their chest. Then the dread sets in. A deep, primal fear that has no specific source, an overwhelming urge to run. People have become nauseous, dizzy, overcome with a sense of panic they cannot explain. And then, if you are truly unlucky, you will hear it. It is not a sound that comes from the church or the trees. It seems to rise up from the ground beneath your feet. Faint moans, the sound of weeping, so filled with despair it can stop your heart. It is the sound of the earth itself, crying out from the trauma it holds. The collective agony of the thousands buried there, their sorrow so immense it has saturated the soil. And always, there is the knowledge of the fault line, just yards away. The feeling that the very ground is unstable, that it is groaning not just with geological tension, but with the weight of the souls it was forced to swallow. The fear that one day the earth will shift, and the horrors buried here will be brought to the surface once more. The ground here is not holy. It is a wound on the landscape, a wound in history, and it has never stopped weeping. The collective sorrow of a forgotten plague is a heavy burden for any land to bear, but the ghosts of San Juan Bautista are victims of a slow, creeping tragedy. Our next destination is a place haunted by a much faster, more violent kind of death. A town that earned its nickname from the giant oak tree in its center, a tree whose branches served as a makeshift gallows. We are going to a place where the spirits are not sorrowful. They are angry. And in the basement of an ice cream parlor built over the roots of that hanging tree, you can still hear the final choked gasps of the men who died there. Haunted Place Number 4, Placerville, El Dorado County. We now climb higher into the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, to a town with a name so brutal it has become a legend in itself. A name earned with rope and fear and the hard, grim justice of the gold rush. We have come to Placerville, but you may know it by its other name, Hangtown. Today, Placerville is a charming, historic town. Its main street is lined with beautifully preserved 19th century buildings that house antique shops, restaurants, and art galleries. It's a popular stop for tourists, a quaint reminder of California's wild past. But the town's nickname isn't a folksy piece of marketing. It is a historical fact. And it is a chilling reminder of the violence that once held this place in its grip. In the chaotic gold rush of 1849, this was a town called Dry Diggins, and it was drowning in gold and crime, with no formal law to speak of. So the miners created their own. Justice was swift, public, and merciless, and its symbol stood in the center of town, a massive white oak tree. Its sturdy branches became a makeshift courthouse, jury box, and gallows, all in one. After 3 men were accused of robbery and murder, they were marched to the tree and summarily hanged before the entire populace. The message was clear. This was now Hangtown. The tree is long gone, cut down a century ago, but its location is well known. On that very spot today stands a building. On the ground floor is the Hangman's Tree Ice Cream Saloon, a place where families and children laugh and eat ice cream on a sunny afternoon. A perfect picture of modern innocence. But directly beneath their feet, in the dark, stone-walled basement, the roots of that tree remain, and so do the angry, tormented spirits of the men who died upon its branches. The employees of the saloon whisper stories. They hate going down into the basement alone. And for good reason. The haunting here is not a gentle, sorrowful echo. It is an active, aggressive, and terrifying presence. It begins with the feeling of not being alone, of a heavy, malevolent energy in the cramped space. Then, it becomes physical. Workers have felt the distinct, icy touch of unseen hands on their necks. They have been grabbed firmly by the shoulder, only to spin around and find nothing but empty, damp air. Some have been shoved, hard, from behind. This is not a ghost trying to communicate. This is an entity lashing out. And then there is the smell. It comes and goes without warning. A cloying metallic odor that has nothing to do with the age of the building. It is the unmistakable stench of death. But the physical contact, the suffocating presence, the horrifying smell, none of it compares to the sound. This is what breaks people. This is what makes them flee up the stairs, refusing to ever go back down alone. In the dead silence of the cellar, you can hear them. The final agonizing moments of the hanged men. It is not a scream or a moan. It is the sound of a human body being violently deprived of air. A sharp, guttural, choking gasp. A desperate, wet rattle from a throat being crushed by a rope. It is the most primal sound of terror. A sound that should only exist for a fleeting moment, but here, in this basement, it is trapped. It replays, over and over, a fragment of pure biological horror for anyone who dares to listen in the dark. The men who died on that tree don't rest in peace. They are trapped in a loop of their own violent end, and they are not afraid to share their final, agonizing moments with anyone who dares to enter their space. The rage of a few vengeful spirits, trapped in the place of their execution, is a terrifying force. Theirs is a haunting born of injustice and personal terror. But what happens when the haunting is not born of malice, but of a catastrophe so vast and so sudden, it rips the soul from an entire landscape? Our next story takes us to a place where the ghosts are not counted in the dozens, but in the hundreds. We're going to a quiet valley that in the middle of one dark night was scoured from the earth by a 14-story wall of water, a man-made disaster that unleashed a torrent of unimaginable death. There, the haunting is not confined to a basement. It's in the wind, in the riverbed, and in the phantom cries that echo across the valley floor. Haunted place number 3, Santa Paula, Ventura County. We have encountered the rage of hanged men and the sorrow of heartbroken lovers. But our next location is haunted by something on an entirely different scale. We travel south, to the beautiful and tranquil Santa Clara River Valley, a peaceful landscape of citrus groves and fertile farmland that stretches for miles. It is serene, it is idyllic, and it is the site of one of the deadliest man-made disasters in American history. This isn't a ghost story. It is a historical nightmare. And the nightmare began just before midnight, on March 12, 1928. Miles upriver from the sleeping towns of Santa Paula, Piru, and Fiddlemore, the St.Francis Dam, a concrete titan holding back 12 billion gallons of water, began to fail. It did not leak. It did not crack. It disintegrated. In the dark of night, the dam collapsed with unimaginable violence, unleashing the entire reservoir in a single roaring wave. It was not water. It was a moving mountain, 14 stories high, a churning black mass of mud, rock, and the debris of entire forests, and it was moving at 18 miles per hour. It scoured the canyon floor down to the bedrock. It obliterated entire work camps, erasing them and the dozens of families inside from existence. As it thundered down the valley, it swallowed farmhouses, tore bridges from their foundations, and twisted railroad tracks into spaghetti. By the time the torrent reached Santa Paula, it was still a monstrous wall of death. More than 430 people were killed. That is the official number. The true number is believed to be far, far higher, well over 600, as the bodies of countless unregistered migrant workers and their families were swept out to sea, never to be found, never to be counted. They died in their sleep with no warning. And it is their collective, sudden, and terrifying death that has permanently scarred this valley. The haunting here is not in a single house or a single basement. The haunting is the valley itself. For nearly a century, residents living miles apart, from Fillmore to Santa Paula, have reported the same inexplicable phenomena. It starts with the sound. On a still, dry night, when the river is nothing but a gentle stream, they hear it. The phantom roar of a flash flood, a terrifying wall of sound, the rush of billions of gallons of water appearing from nowhere and vanishing just as quickly. And woven into that roar are the human sounds. The faint screams of men and women carried on the night air, the cries of children. It is the sound of a community being annihilated, an acoustic ghost replaying the valley's worst moment. Then there are the apparitions. These are not the angry, interactive spirits of Hangtown. These are the lost souls of the drowned. They are seen wandering the citrus groves that now grow where their homes once stood. They appear most often along the banks of the riverbed, walking slowly, their heads down, as if searching for something. They are looking for their homes. They are looking for their children. They are looking for a world that was washed away in an instant. They are confused, sorrowful figures, forever trapped in the landscape of their own mass grave. This is not a legend. This is a mass trauma event, an emotional cataclysm so powerful it has been imprinted onto the land itself. The sheer volume and consistency of the eyewitness accounts, passed down through generations, makes this one of the largest and most tragic haunted sites in the entire country. The valley is at peace, but the souls of the drowned are not. They are a permanent part of the landscape, their final moments of terror and loss replaying for eternity. The horror of hundreds of lives extinguished by a single catastrophic event is almost too vast to comprehend. The ghosts of the Santa Clara Valley are a chorus of shared tragedy, but there is another kind of horror, a horror that is not vast, but small and sharp and personal. A horror born not from a failing structure, but from a failing of human decency. Our next story takes us to a place haunted not by a crowd of victims, but by the furious, vengeful spirit of a single woman. A woman who was not killed by a force of nature, but by the hatred of a mob, and whose rage is now so powerful, it is said you can feel it trying to choke the very life out of you as you stand on the bridge where she died. Haunted place number 2, Downieville, Sierra County. We have witnessed the sorrow of hundreds, but now we narrow our focus. We come to a horror that is not widespread, but singular, not accidental, but deliberate. A horror born from a single act of supreme injustice. We travel deep into the remote, rugged mountains of the Sierra Nevada, to the isolated town of Downieville, a place forever stained by the events of one horrifying day, and to a small wooden bridge over the rushing Yuba River, a bridge that serves as a monument to a murder. The date was July 5th, 1851. The town was swollen with thousands of miners, filled with gold fever, whiskey, and raw xenophobic hatred. The day before, a local woman of Mexican descent, Josefa Segovia, had been assaulted by a drunken miner. When he and his friends came to her small cabin the next day, she defended herself. She stabbed her attacker, and he died. In a just world, her story would have ended there. But this was not a just world. A mob, hungry for blood, dragged her from her home. They held a sham trial. Her testimony, that she had acted in self-defense, was ignored. The crowd, roaring with prejudice, served as judge and jury. Within 2 hours, they had their verdict. They were going to hang her. They marched her to the Jersey Bridge, a platform built over the rapids of the river. It is said she was pregnant. She walked to her own execution with a dignity her killers did not possess, calmly adjusting the noose around her own neck. She told them she had no guilt for her final act, only for the contempt she felt for them. Then they kicked the plank out from under her. She became the first and only woman to be officially hanged in the state of California. Her body was buried in an unmarked grave, but her spirit never left the bridge. And it is not a spirit of sorrow. It is a spirit of pure, concentrated, undying rage. People who walk across the Jersey Bridge today are struck by it. It's not a gradual chill. It is a sudden, suffocating cold that descends with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from your lungs even on the hottest summer day. It is a cold born of pure hatred, and for the truly unlucky, the feeling becomes terrifyingly specific. Visitors have reported the distinct, horrifying sensation of invisible hands closing around their own throat, the feeling of being choked, the pressure tightening, making it impossible to breathe. It is her final agonizing moments, weaponized. Her rage, inflicting upon others the very act that ended her life. Her presence is not just felt, it is seen and heard. Her dark, spectral figure has been spotted on the riverbank, not wandering, but standing perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the bridge, the instrument of her murder. She watches with an unnerving, vengeful stillness, and when the wind blows through the canyon, locals say you can hear a woman's sobs. Not the gentle weeping of a heartbroken bride, but the furious, ragged, choking sobs of a woman whose life, and the life of her unborn child, were stolen by a mob. Paranormal investigators have captured evidence here that is shockingly direct. Electronic voice phenomena, EVPs, that when analyzed, contain not just whispers, but clear, angry curses spat out in Spanish from the thin air. Her presence is considered so aggressive, so filled with a righteous fury, that after more than 170 years, many locals still refuse to cross that bridge alone after dark. Her rage was forged in an act of ultimate injustice, and it has not cooled in over a century and a half. Her spirit remains, forever bound to the instrument of her murder, demanding a justice she will never receive. The focused rage of a single murdered woman is one of the most terrifying forces imaginable. It is a haunting that can physically harm you, but there is one final level of horror. A horror that is not confined to a bridge or a valley or a hotel. A horror that you can take with you. Our final destination is a place where the dead are not just angry. They are possessive. A town so perfectly preserved in its own misery that its residents, all of them, refuse to let go. We are going to a place where the ghosts don't just haunt the living. They curse them. A place where stealing so much as a single nail is an invitation for the entire town to follow you home and tear your life apart until you give it back. Haunted place number 1, Bodie, Mono County. We have arrived at our final destination. We have felt the rage of the hanged, the sorrow of the drowned, and the fury of the murdered. But all of those horrors are bound to a place. You can, in theory, walk away from them. You cannot walk away from this one, because this haunting will follow you home. We end our journey high in the Eastern Sierra at the end of a long, dusty road, in a place that feels like the edge of the world, a place where the ghosts are the only residents. This is Bodie. The moment you arrive, you understand this place is different. It is not a ruin. It is not a reconstruction. It is a town in a state of arrested decay. It was abandoned, and time simply stopped. You peer through the windows of the homes, and you see tables still set for dinner. In the general store, goods from a century ago still line the shelves, covered in a thick blanket of dust. It doesn't look like a town that died. It looks like a town whose residents simply vanished mid-breath, leaving everything behind. But they didn't vanish. They are still here. All of them. Life in Bodie was brutal. The town motto was, "Goodbye, God, I'm going to Bodie." It was a place of extreme violence, where gunfights in the streets were a daily occurrence. A place of extreme weather, where savage winters would bury the town in snow for months, trapping everyone in an isolated frozen hell. It was a place of extreme hardship, where disease, mining accidents, and fires were a constant threat. The people who lived and died here were not soft. They were tough, territorial, and fiercely possessive of the little they had. They fought for every ounce of gold, for every scrap of land, for every last bit of respect. And in death, that instinct has only grown stronger. This is why Bodie is the most haunted town in California. It's not because of a single ghost. It is because of the entire town. It is because of the Bodie Curse. The rule is simple. When you visit, you are a guest in their home, and you will not steal from them. Do not take anything. Not a rock from the street. Not a splinter of wood from a decaying wall. Not a single rusted, square-headed nail. Because if you do, the guardians of Bodie will know. The moment you cross the town line with a piece of their home in your pocket, you have invited them into your life, and they will not leave. The curse does not manifest as a figure in your bedroom. It is far more sinister. It is the slow, methodical, and relentless dismantling of your life. It starts with a string of bad luck that you try to dismiss as coincidence. You lose your wallet. Then you lose your job. Then comes the accident. A fender bender at first, then something more serious. Your health begins to fail with mysterious illnesses that doctors cannot diagnose. Your relationships crumble. Your finances evaporate. Everything you value, everything you have built, begins to turn to dust. It is the spiritual equivalent of a slow-acting poison, an unseen force that has attached itself to you, all because of a single foolish souvenir. And there is only one way to stop it. You must return what you took. The park rangers at Bodie State Historic Park are the keepers of the evidence. Every single week, packages arrive at their office. Packages from all over the world, containing dusty rocks, bent nails, and shards of broken glass. And with them come the letters. Desperate, terrified confessions, addressed not to the Park Service, but to the ghosts of Bodie themselves. They are filled with pleas for forgiveness. Please take this back. One letter reads, a rusty nail taped to the paper. My life has been a living hell since the day I took this. I'm sorry. I believe in the curse now. Another, from a man who took a piece of a bottle, details a 6-month period in which he suffered a debilitating injury, lost his business, and his wife filed for divorce. I am returning what is yours, he writes. Please, just make it stop. These are not just stories. They are hundreds upon hundreds of testimonies from people whose lives were torn apart. The ghosts of Bodie are not just apparitions. They are a collective force. They are guardians, ensuring that what happened in Bodie stays in Bodie. They have made their desolate, windswept town an eternal fortress. You may visit their home, but if you try to take a piece of it with you, they will, in return, take pieces of your life, one by one, until you give it back. They are the final, terrifying reminder that some places, and some memories, are best left undisturbed. From the furious rage of Josefa Segovia on a lonely bridge, to the collective sorrow of hundreds drowned in the Santa Clara Valley, to the possessive, inescapable curse of Bodie itself. We have seen that California's beautiful landscape is built upon a foundation of tragedy, and its sunshine casts some very long, very dark shadows. These stories, burned into the history of these towns, prove that the past is never truly dead. It's not even past. And that leads me to a question for you. After this journey, which story truly got under your skin? Was it the physical, choking rage in Downieville? The heartbreaking grief in Jamestown's National Hotel? Or the thought of that curse from Bodie attaching itself to your life? Let me know in the comments below which place you would absolutely refuse to spend a night in. I will be reading every single one, but these are just the stories that have been recorded. What about the ones that haven't? What local legend haunts your hometown? What ghost story is whispered in your community? Share it below. Because the next dark corner of the map we investigate could be because of you. If you made it this far and you appreciate these journeys into the shadows of history, a like is always welcome. And be sure to subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss our next descent. We're heading east to Pennsylvania, to the decaying, crumbling cell blocks of an infamous penitentiary, a place where the system of solitary confinement was designed to drive inmates insane. And it worked so well, their tormented, maddened spirits still scream in the empty corridors today. You won't want to miss it. The stories for tonight are over, but the places remain. And the next time you're driving through a quiet, forgotten town late at night, and you see a single light on in an old window, just remember to ask yourself, who or what might still be home?